Like the video games I played in 2020 countdown, it's about time I got to this one. Like the TV shows of 2021 countdown, my video games I played in 2021 countdown is not a top 10. However, this one is a top 6 instead of 7. I didn't do a top 10 because I felt that I hadn't played 4 other games enough to warrant discussing them. That's not to say this year was dry for gaming, more so that I focused more on certain games than others. I've talked about games I barely played or cared about in previous countdowns, which has come off as disingenuous, especially considering these are top lists, so I feel good about this change in tradition. I do still keep the tradition of including games from outside the year though, as long as I play them within 2021. With that said, let's look back on the interesting year in gaming that was 2021. I finally got a PlayStation 5 in 2021, and what better way to begin my PS5 journey than by playing the tech demo that came with it. I didn't get to play the first Astrobot, as I don't care to buy a PSVR, so it was nice that I could play Astro's Playroom on PS5. While I wouldn't call myself a Sony pony, I am a fan of PlayStation's mascots, so this game was a treat for me, referencing so much of what the consoles have to offer. That includes Sly Cooper, Horizon, and of course Ratchet Clank, that are in fact my 3 favorite video game franchises. This game is more than just references, however, offering fun gameplay with smooth controls. It's very simple but effective and mixes itself up a bit, like climbing with a monkey suit, steering a spaceship, and ice skating like a pro. I wasn't a fan of the motion-controlled rolling ball, but everything else was pretty fun and did good introducing me to the PS5's capabilities. This game made me a big fan of the DualSense controller, giving satisfying haptic feedback and sound effects. The music is great too, especially the one that sings about the SSD, and it's understandable that there would be a song about that, as the SSD makes the load time super fast, which is one of the PS5's selling points. The game is also visually pleasing, and I'm particularly fond of these transformations in the hub. Being a tech demo, it's a short experience, only lasting a few hours, but it was few hours of pure fun and comfort, making Astro's Playroom one of my favorite launch titles. This fun game being at the bottom of this list means we're in for a fun ride. On the topic of fun and comfort, Kena Bridge of Spirits is another delight, and the first 2021 game to appear on this list. Kena brings very wholesome vibes, a kind young girl with a stick befriending adorable little guys and healing angered spirits. The aesthetics are gorgeous, reminiscent of high-budget 3D animated movies, which is extremely impressive, considering this is an indie game. That's right, this one's made by industry newcomer Ember Lab, who previously made a popular fan film of The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, which also looked amazing, so I guess the beautiful visuals aren't that surprising, but they are to be commended. Even though the game is very vibrant and relaxing, it's not afraid to go to dark places, quite literally. There's a lot of destruction throughout the land, which Kena has to fix, transforming dark and depressing areas into bright and cheery ones. The game is no cakewalk either, throwing some tough enemies at you, and even tougher bosses. Seriously, I wondered if I would be able to beat some of these in one sitting. I did always manage, but a single slip-up could have meant more attempts. That's partly because some of them last long, but the challenge is otherwise fair, because of the fleshed out combat. The combat packs good variety as you unlock more skills, and I love that the rots can be incorporated into some of the moves. The rots are the little furry dudes that follow Kena around. They're similar to Pikmin, as they can be commanded to help out with tasks like moving objects around, and are integral to healing the land. They're involved in some decent puzzles, but the puzzles I really enjoyed were the rocks that stay in specific positions for a limited time, so that you have to quickly platform across them. These are so well designed, and heavily reminded me of the time stop shenanigans in Ratchet & Clank A Crack in Time, which I adore. I wouldn't call the storytelling of Kena particularly interesting, but the way the main cutscenes were directed made them very powerful and moving. It helps that they look so stunning, and that the music accompanying them is so beautiful. I will admit, however, that one of the few criticisms I have for this game is that the audio mixing is bad, the voice acting usually being too quiet compared to the bombastic music. The voice acting isn't that good either, but it's serviceable. My other issues amount to nitpicks, which is a testament to how impressive Ember Lab's first game is. I will watch their career with great interest. "20 21 was a great year for game revivals, and Metroid Dread was possibly the most notable out of the lot. It got revealed some months before it released, and pretty much no one saw it coming, even though Metroid 2 had gotten a remake 4 years prior. But you can't blame Metroid fans for doubting when they've been dealt such a harsh hand. I'm not one of those fans. In fact, Dread is the first Metroid game I played for real. Sure, I've tried some Super Metroid on Nintendo Switch Online, but only for a few minutes. And while it's thus unfair for me to compare them, I'm pretty sure I prefer Dread's modernized take on the series. This is best demonstrated by the fluid movement and combat, that are initially quite simple, but gradually grow more and more complex and satisfying as you progress through the game. I seriously didn't expect to be able to jump infinitely or traverse effortlessly underwater, even under lava. Outside of Super Smash Bros., Dread has the best combat I've experienced in a 2D game, making bosses and enemy encounters so much fun to tackle. It helps that the difficulty is no slouch, offering a tough but fair challenge. I died so many times to the final boss, but figuring out his patterns felt very satisfying. I had fought him so many times that when I replayed the game, I actually managed to defeat him in one try. I'll admit that it's a bit too long, which is also the case for some other encounters, but they're nevertheless exciting. So are the Emmy sections, that are scary due to the creepy atmosphere and helplessness of facing the Emmy. Some may critique the fact that their encounters are randomized, but I feel it adds to the tension, and makes timing them correctly so satisfying. Perhaps what impresses me the most about this game is its level design. Given its name, it's obviously a Metroidvania, where you'll see things and areas you can't access until you've gained specific abilities at later points. That kind of design flows seamlessly in this game, and makes for several aha moments when you realize you're able to visit an area you couldn't before. It's also impressive how this game directs the player to destinations, especially considering how often you teleport between different sections of the world map, often back and forth between them. It does this not by relying on markers, but rather efficient level design. For instance, by dynamically closing off paths you're not supposed to take. I will admit that I did get lost sometimes, and didn't care to spend a while figuring out the right path, prompting me to look up playthroughs instead, but I won't be old David Jaffe about it. I'm very positive about Metroid Dread, but a reason it doesn't beat the next couple on my list is because their stories make me more invested. Dread does have a narrative of its own, but it's quite minimal and not prioritized, which is basically proven by how jarring the ending is. I did find certain lore drops quite interesting, however. For my first real foray into the Metroid series, Dread was a treat. It doesn't quite encourage me to go back to older ones, but it does make me eager to play future installments. On the topic of great game revivals of 2021, Psychonauts 2 might be even greater. I had played the first Psychonauts back in 2015, but only for a little bit, because its age didn't quite gel with me. I initially went into the sequel without having played any more of the original, but then I got the urge to go back and finish it. It was still pretty janky, but I think it made me appreciate 2 more than if I had gone completely blind into it. That said, I still find the sequel's combat janky. It's a big improvement and has a lot more to offer, but that's part of the problem, since you can only have 4 abilities equipped at a time, switching them out takes time, and there are certain abilities I want to keep at all times, particularly levitation. I love rolling around on a small psychic ball. Rolling around on bigger physical balls, however, can be pretty bad, especially in places where you fall easily. I'm not the biggest fan of some of the other minigames either, and the bosses are cool, but not that fun to fight. This entry is already sounding more negative than the previous ones on this list, so why is it higher than those? That's because the game is pretty brilliant otherwise. Psychonauts 2 is one of the most gamey games out there, utilizing the medium to its fullest. It has such a strong artistic vision where gameplay, writing, and presentation are given equal importance, and it wouldn't be nearly as special if you couldn't play it. Most of the levels are inside people's minds, and Double Fine Productions went all out with the creativity, Raz being able to heal people's minds by clearing literal emotional baggage, and defeating mental disorders. There's an enemy called Enabler, which enables bad thoughts, meaning it empowers other enemies like doubts and panic attacks. It's ingenious stuff. I've been dealing with stress and anxiety for the past couple of years, so it feels cathartic to kill bad vibes. I love how each mind level is unique and characterized by the character's mental state, saying a lot about them through subtext. The mind of the timid Compton Bull features a game show where he's being criticized by other Psychonauts. What a fun level that is. Cassiopeia locks her different archetypes away, because she can't handle all of them. Raz's own archetype is adorable by the way, and the other paper cutouts are funny as well.
Nice sword.
'Twas bequeathed to me by the fair lady of the lake, so that I may slay this dragon.
What did I ever do to you?
In the lonely alcoholic Bob Sonato's mind, he's on a tiny island surrounded by a sea of beer, cut off from his painful memories. It's easy to sympathize with these broken characters, which makes it so satisfying to help them overcome their struggles. The way each of these levels ends is truly heartwarming and gives me goosebumps. Psy King's mind might be my favorite level, where you help him regain his senses and memories. The different areas here are so aesthetically pleasing and trippy, and I'm a sucker for stories about getting the band back together. I also love the song number at the end.
Lost alone, neither skin nor bone, just a thought is all I've got, now my cover's blown.
It was awesome to watch Psy King turn into Helmut Fullbear of the Psychic 6. I saw the twist coming, but mainly because I had found some optional lore, proving that this game can have some subtle foreshadowing. I did not predict the twist villain, however, as I was so sure it would be Auto Mentalis, but alas, the writers got me with a red herring. Psychonauts 2 honestly has some of the best writing I've witnessed in a game, delivering a well-structured narrative with emotional beats and clever twists, some of which recontextualize characters and events from the first game in fascinating ways, especially Ford Cruller and the Aquato family's past. I didn't find the new intern characters that memorable, and some of the old characters could have been utilized better, but the writing is generally amazing. One of the most memorable moments happens near the start of the game, in which you use mental connection to alter Agent Forsyth's mind. That ability is only used once for that purpose, but with a good justification which led to a meaningful message. It was fun to make her say dumb things while it lasted.
Whenever I see socks with sandals, it reminds me of my favorite German college professor.
Interesting.
There's a lot more I could say about Psychonauts 2. I only scratched the surface really, but I don't want to make this section too long. Just know that it's one of the most creative games out there. It might look like a Kickstarter indie title, but it manages to outshine many big AAA games with its style.
Feel out the galaxy and hear the flow of time.
2021 was the year I got into the Mass Effect series, through the remasters on the Legendary Edition, and while the first one was decent, the second blew it out of the water. I was initially going to give this spot to Mass Effect 3, but I did technically wait until 2022 to play that one, given that I got burnt out from playing the first two games in 2 weeks of September, and had to find free time for the next one. Oh, and psst, just between you and me, I also need more entries for the next list. Anyhow, Mass Effect 2 is also a competent entry, probably even more so on a critical level, being the sequel to improve on the original's many flaws. Don't get me wrong, the original did a phenomenal job creating the Mass Effect universe and telling a compelling story, but I found the gameplay to be mostly basic and monotonous. I don't find Mass Effect 2's gameplay that engaging either, but it is a notable step up in that regard, ditching the repetitive Mako and side planets, and improving on the combat in some ways. Mass Effect 2 has the best mission in the series, that being the suicide mission at the very end, where the gameplay switches itself up. Everyone, including Shepard, can die, and it's also possible to have no one die, if you make the correct decisions. On my first run, Thane, Saeed and Mordin died, which I wouldn't allow, so I fortunately managed to save them all before jumping into Mass Effect 3. Going from Mass Effect 1 to 2, I quickly noticed that BioWare upped the presentational quality. The way the intro went from full chaos to a momentary silent respite left me in awe.
Come on, baby, hold together. Hold together.
It wasn't hard to tell what aspects of the game were DLC, given that they featured even more detail than the main game. Those DLCs were pretty good, especially the Shadow Broker DLC, which is so integral to the overarching storyline of Mass Effect that I was surprised it wasn't even part of the main campaign. That's the price of being a rushed EA game, I suppose. It's impressive how good the game turned out despite this. Honestly, my biggest gripe with Mass Effect 2 is interestingly enough its storyline, as it's so minimalistic, so it was a bit disappointing after the original had such a grand narrative. This minimal focus on plot fortunately made for bigger focus on characters, allowing you to form meaningful connections with your squad mates. It helps that each of them have their own loyalty mission, and you can speak with them in between every mission on the Normandy ship. There are other crew members to talk to as well, and the different locations also feature interesting characters. All this combines to form probably the strongest cast in any video game. Joker, Legion, Tali, Garrus, Thane, and especially Mordin are some of my favorite video game characters. They're so interesting and fun to talk to.
I'm sorry, I know that was important, but you perform Gilbert and Sullivan?
I am the very model of a scientist Solarian. I've studied species Turian, Asari, and Batarian.
Furthermore, Commander Shepard is one of the best video game protagonists, who I could mold based on decisions I took. That's another seriously impressive thing about this game and series, the amount of choices you can take and what consequences they lead to. No playthrough is the same, and I'd have to replay it countless times to truly complete it. For now though, one playthrough is enough to put this game at number 2 on this list. To absolutely no one's surprise, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is my favorite game I played in 2021. There was no way that any other game would take the number 1 spot, because Horizon Forbidden West got delayed to 2022. That doesn't take away from how much I love Rift Apart though, which exceeded my expectations, and became one of my favorite games. While I don't prefer it over A Crack in Time, it's most certainly the best R&C game since that installment, which came out 12 years before, and it's a major improvement over its predecessor R&C PS4. That game looked bloody beautiful, unsurprisingly so, as it got developed alongside a movie, which makes certain cutscenes questionable considering how lifeless they are. Rift Apart meanwhile is consistently fluid in every scene, no matter the importance, and looks considerably better. Insomniac might have finally realized their goal to have R&C match Pixar quality, and beat out pretty much every other game visually in the process. It's certainly the best looking cartoony game on the market. The soundtrack is nowhere near that impressive, but it impressed me. It's the best R&C soundtrack since A Crack in Time, and is a little better if we discount the space radio, so good on Mark Motherspaw for breaking the meh R&C score curse. Blizzard Primed and Ready slaps so hard. Shifting attention to something more impressive again, Rift Apart might have the best gameplay in the whole series. It doesn't have the best Clank sections, and it actually has the worst flying mechanics, but it does have the best combat, as well as Ratchet/Rivet traversal. The DualSense's haptic feedback and adaptive triggers enhance the feeling of combat, and the Phantom Dash makes it more dynamic. That dash, along with the Rift Tether and wall running, improve traversal as well. Although not new to the series, the hover boots contribute the most, turning an already fantastic traversal gadget into absolute gameplay perfection. If A Crack in Time's hover boots were this smooth, it'd be my favorite game in a heartbeat. While there may not be that many levels in this game, they're pretty long and ambitious. I was really impressed by most of them, especially Blizzard Prime, Cordelion, and Ardolus, that offer some tremendous atmospheres and spectacles. My favorite level is still Savali, however. I just love open world R&C levels where you can collect a bunch of stuff. Besides, it's where you get the hover boots, along with Kit. After the badly written R&C PS4, I was prepared to be disappointed by Rift Apart's writing, but oddly enough, I wasn't. Due to my lowered expectations, I was actually pleasantly surprised. Sure, it's not great and plays it quite safe, but aside from some plot holes and cringe here and there, it's actually kind of good. There are a number of decent characters in a mostly well-structured narrative that focuses on consistent themes. It doesn't go crazy with the multiverse concept, but it does offer some neat counterparts to existing characters, including Emperor Nefarious, Captain Quantum, Rivet, and my now 11th favorite character in the franchise, Kit. I don't care too much for most of the other new characters, and I'm not a fan of how certain old characters got treated, but Kit is a crowning achievement. I'm surprised they managed to make such a good new R&C character in this day and age, but they actually did it. This actually makes me kind of optimistic about the long overdue Lombax Search storyline, which surely has to happen now. I look forward to seeing Rivet and Kit's relationship grow as well. So yeah, Rift Apart may not be perfect, but it's much better than I anticipated. I already knew the gameplay and visuals were going to be fantastic, but I had low expectations for both the soundtrack and the writing, and I was pleasantly surprised by both. So instead of becoming my 7th favorite R&C game, it became my 4th favorite, and I'd argue it's the 3rd best on a critical level. After a decade of decline for the series, Rift Apart was a much needed return to form. Now it remains to be seen if Insomniac can keep it up. Those were my 6 favorite video games I played within 2021, and I'd say this list was quality over quantity, which is refreshing. The 4 that did release in 2021 indicates that it was a very good year for games, despite none of them leaving such a huge mark on the games industry. That's what I find really fascinating about 2021 as a year in gaming, that it didn't release many huge blockbusters, and that smaller games could therefore compete for Game of the Year. Just look at the Game Awards. The biggest game there was probably Resident Evil 8, and it didn't even win. Not to mention that a kind of obscure game like Psychonauts 2 got nominated, and that Ratchet Clank finally got acknowledged as a Game of the Year contender, after never getting that consideration despite some previous R&C games being of a similar quality. Perhaps bigger games like Horizon Forbidden West and God of War Ragnarok got delayed to 2022, but that didn't stop 2021 from being memorable. I'm Arcadon, and hopefully, you'll see me next time!